So let's start with, let's jump right into the topic, right? Cities and municipalities educating and preparing for big projects. So utility companies sue contract locators and excavators, kind of an organized game plan for a large project, but when the construction starts, a lot of that goes out the window because locating resources are inadequate or cannot staff to these spikes. What are some best practices at municipalities for these projects?
In my experience, whenever these large projects spin up, pretty much every single time, the utilities get overwhelmed, the locators get overwhelmed. They're geared up for a certain level, and once they get over that level, then of course chaos ensues. Some things that I've seen that have really made a big impact are just mainly communication. At the City of Columbia, we had this happen a few times, and first few times we struggled. The more we went through it, the better off we got. The biggest thing we did is we got everybody in the City of Columbia, from the director all the way down to the janitor. Got everybody on board, everybody was thinking the same way, and everything got so much easier. And then, of course, increased communication with the excavators also.
Yeah, follow up on that there, John. When we have like a big, huge project in Warrensburg, we do the exact same thing. We get everybody involved, communicate with each other, and start from the top to go all the way to the bottom. We do the exact same thing. So we just kind of piggyback off of what you guys do. We kind of seen a little bit what you guys did, and that's why we kind of piggyback a little bit off of what you guys do.
And that's the exact same thing we did too. We made a lot of ordinance changes, but we didn't rewrite the book. We looked to our neighbor down the road, our bigger neighbors down towards St. Louis that already wrote the book, and they shared what they did with us, and we took what we felt like was home and put that in our ordinances. The rest of it just kind of left it by the wayside, and I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of what we did. We just, big projects like that go on, we actually do that. We just kind of look at what other municipalities are doing, and we just kind of piggyback off of what they do and what works for them. If we have questions, we just communicate back and forth different cities and stuff like that. So,
by far, laying out these projects in advance, a lot of communications. Often enough, the utilities have that capital project in mind to get it before everybody that is going to be impacted, at least a year ahead, and start getting people prepared. Some of these large telecommunication projects happen over a very short few weeks, and they're going to be a strain on a small municipality that may have maybe one locator or a part-time locator that does everything else aside from locating. So having that preparation, that plan, goes a long way. Once it gets to construction, a lot of things can happen, but it's a lot more manageable if that communication has been happening, and as changes happen, if that communication keeps up. And lining up the project. Often enough, municipalities need to work with their city government to start laying out permitting and ordinances so that when the job is done, you don't have a lot of problems afterwards that you inherit.
Right, I agree. Communication is key to this whole thing. You have to talk. The first thing, I think Terry does the same thing, is we have a meeting with the contractor before anything starts, and that's where it all starts.
Communication.
Okay, so let me push back on that. Like, it seems like you guys are saying communication will save the world, but let's say I'm the project manager and I communicate with you, you can communicate with me, and I'm still like, okay, yeah, I'm going to call 1,000 tickets on Monday, and I expect it to be done by Wednesday, and have a nice day. I mean, is there something else besides communications, like maybe what Saul was mentioning, ordinances, or something that's with a little more teeth than communications where let's sit in a circle, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya, right? Like, is there something else here?
Well, communication is like an onion. Just by placing a locate ticket, you're communicating. You're communicating that I want to dig right here, and as a utility, by locating that ticket, you're communicating, here's where my utilities are, please don't hit them. But we go deeper into that communication as far as getting to know those excavators and actually having real conversations with them. Maybe even outside of the excavation, get to know them, get to know what makes them tick. That's really where I believe the communication really shines, not just the standard communication.
I agree with you there, John. It's a matter of knowing your contractors, getting to know them, how they work. I mean, one day they may be different than the next day. Talk to them, get out on the job site and just talk to them and find out what their crew's about.
Yep.
And I mean, by the time you get all that done, I know you guys are like best friends. I mean, you don't have to go out and have drinks afterwards or anything like that, but communicate and talk to them. I mean, they'll feel more comfortable for you the more you talk.
Definitely leadership skills to get in with the crews and have them understand where you're coming from. So, haven't done it, but just the thought happened in my mind with our own crews. So often enough, we go out there in the morning, check on them, bring them a cup of coffee, some donuts and stuff like that, have a safety meeting. There is nothing that prevents us from doing that with a crew from a telecommunications. And not to pick on telecommunications, but unfortunately, that's the work in front of us, and for the next couple of years, that's what's going to, keep us busy. And so, yes, you can lay out a future project as best you can, and when it happens, a lot of stuff can go off the rails. But I think if you have a good relationship with the contractor, if you, if they see the situation from your way, they may want everything located and marked by tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. Okay, they can scream and yell as much as they want. It's just not going to happen. So what's going to happen? What really realistically needs to happen is they're going to have to adjust their schedule. They're going to have to move crews around. And unfortunately, it's on them. They say, "Oh, I have a bunch of downtime," but you roll with it and you just keep those lines of communications open.
Usually if you get to talking to the contractor, you get to know them like that.
Mm-hmm.
They'll work with you.
Right.
How far are you gonna get today? Well, I'm gonna do 100 foot. All right, we'll mark you 150 feet and you can go and we'll be back tomorrow. We've got other projects to take care of. So again, it's back to that communication thing. Like you said, there's layers to that.
Yep.
So, but it takes somebody to initiate those conversations to make all that happen.
And to build on your point, that the excavator may have to amend their work and they may have to slow their schedules down. As a utility, you may have to staff up also.
True.
At the city of Columbia, there came a point in time, from the time we left on a Friday night and I checked the tickets on Sunday morning, we were about 6 weeks behind.
Wow.
Tickets are all due in a couple of days, especially within 10 days. So we were way, way behind. We had linemen doing locates. We had substation technicians doing locates. We had dispatchers doing locates. We had the entire team doing locates. And we did that until we got out of that hole. Then we got back on the communication, and it got a lot smoother after that.
Yeah, that follows up with that too with you, John. If you start from the top and come down, from top of the administration all the way down, they already know what's going on. If you're communicating with that information, the information that you're pulling in from contractors, you're bringing that to the table with all your execs from the top down, then they already know what's going on with your project. So that way, it still goes back to that's just communicating throughout the whole board. So that's kind of what we do
Goes
over
back
there.
to that onion.
Yeah.
Peeling back those layers, more communication.
Absolutely.
To answer the original question a little better, as far as ordinances and policies, we wrote all kinds of ordinances and policies, and they were a godsend to us. They helped us so much. But that's kind of a last ditch resort to communicate. If you can solve it with communication, you're way better off. You make way more friends.
Can you talk about some of the most effective ordinances and I guess policies in these municipalities that you have seen?
Well, the ordinance policies are like an onion also. So you've got the simple, the first layer is you must call in a locate ticket, and then it goes all the way down through Chapter 319, references the best CGA best practices, stuff like that.
So the right-of-way agents that work for utilities, their focus is on the permitting and what the permitting for a particular municipality is going to require. There are some townships and small villages that don't even have a permitting process, don't even require permits. So you start by establishing permitting. If you need the authority through City Hall or the Village Hall to create the ordinance to back up the permit, those communications need to happen. Unfortunately, it all results from lessons learned.
Correct.
Somebody came through, you didn't anticipate, and it's difficult to anticipate everything that is going to possibly happen. But, if you can sit down after a big project and have a good conversation about how to make it go better the next thing, it will pay off. The problem is, in our rush life, we get done with one and we say, oof, that was tough, jump into the next one. No time to do a capstone and no time to, prepare better, but preparation for the next one. goes a long way.
One ordinance that we actually adopted a little bit different, when all the fiber stuff started going in a few years ago, we kind of changed we worked with the contractors and kind of changed our working hours, going from 7 to 7. So that way they'd have a little bit more time. We communicated with the contractors, kind of help them out, what we could actually do. Going to 7 o'clock, would it work better from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock for them, for noise ordinance and stuff like that? So that kind of helped them out a little bit, to just communicating with that.
Do you all have set working hours in Republic?
We do. They have to be completely done and out of there by 6 o'clock. And I came up with that, again, as you said, you learn from your past mistakes.
Right.
Most people are getting home off work about that time. And they've got kids, and they're in the summertime, they're out in the yard.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily want a drill going when they've been at work all day and trying to get dinner ready and all that stuff. So 6 o'clock's a hard stop.
So at Columbia, their working hours now are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but the directional boring hours are 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Reason being, that's when the utility workers leave. They were having to come back in at 4, 5, 6 o'clock for
That
a lot
makes
of
sense.
strikes.
Yep.
And was it possibly because there was less oversight then? Possible. Is it just because that's the end of the day and we're trying to rush to get one more shot done? Possibly. But when we throttled that back to 7 to 3:30, there was a lot of pushback on that. The excavators felt like we were going to cost them downtime and cost them money. The last thing you want to do is cost somebody money. We all work to make money.
Absolutely.
We don't need practice at working. We got fun stuff we can go do. But what we found was after we implemented that 7 to 3:30, we still let them pothole for the next shot from 3:30 to 7 o'clock at night or do restoration or whatever. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of work to be done after 3:30 that's less likely to cause the damage. So once everybody got used to that, it was back to just as smooth as ever was.
So back to the ordinances, I'm trying to understand. It sounds like a lot of the ordinances that help essentially constrain permits if the project owner does not follow certain procedures. Is that accurate? Can you guys expand? I think a lot of the audience would love to hear what types of ordinances help with reducing damages, improving safety.
In essence, the ordinances are kind of like the speed limit. We've got posted speed limits because somebody got in a crash going too fast. Ordinances are no different. You create an ordinance because you have damages, you have problems. You try to prevent those problems from happening on down the road.
Yeah, the municipal side, I take my hands off, but I think at some point you're calling in the sheriff department or you're calling in the local police if they are not following the permitting, or you shut them down. If they don't shut down, then you enforce the permit, you pull the permit. With contractors, that we all need, our drive lanes, and so if the utility and the contractors know what the working hours are, what the restrictions are going to be for working in that town, they can build it into their schedule, they can build it into their budget. Okay, and if they don't read ahead, if they don't prepare ahead, not much you can do, but at least you have a guideline on how you're going to respond, and you can show them something. It's not just something that you're making up.
Sure.
I know in Republic, if a contractor's getting out of hand, they know they're gonna get shut down. for whatever, however long that damage or whatever happened occurred. And that seemed to be a big motivator. My damages started going way down whenever you started shutting people down. Of course, that's money, you know.
Yeah.
But
And it's something you don't want to do.
no,
You never want to have to shut somebody down and cost them money.
No.
But if their project is costing your municipality a lot of money with damages and downtime and whatnot, you have to counteract that somehow because you work for the people that
I
live in your
work for the
city.
people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So I know that's how that works.
So back to communications, which seems to be the key. Does the 811 system do enough to facilitate these communications? Or are these communications happening outside the 811 system?
Well, I would say that a lot of the communication needs to be documented through the 811 system, through the ticket check and things of that nature. But there's a lot of communication that happens outside of the 811 system also. There's a lot of handshake agreements out in the field.
Absolutely.
We promise we won't hit this. We promise we'll locate this to the best of our ability, so on and so
Sure.
forth.
So if that's the case, can the 811 system be modified, improved so that it can, these very effective communications can be kind of within the system, documented within the system, and whatever. Maybe it's like when I'm communicating with Amazon on a lost package, right? It's in the chat. It's always documented. It's not like I'm talking with Betty on the phone at Amazon, right? Is that something that maybe the 811 system can look at incorporating?
Yes, I think we would be naive to think we have a perfect system. Nothing in this world is perfect. As working for 811, I know we have a mechanism in coming down the pipe right now. It's called Ticket Talk, to where a locator or an excavator can initiate that conversation through the Missouri 811 system on the ticket, and then it's completely documented. Now, will every conversation happen through Ticket Talk in the future? Probably not. We're still going to call. We're going to have conversations one-on-one. That will not be documented through the 811 system, but that Ticket Talk will be very beneficial as far as documenting.
That'd be helpful for you, not only for 811, but it would actually be helpful for municipalities too, if they can actually see that too, that what they're actually inquiring about or questions or anything like that. If they put documentation on that, that'd be great for locators to be able to see, or municipalities or anything like that to be able to pull up that ticket, search, and see that.
Yep.
Okay. Are there still municipalities in Missouri? We're in Missouri, right? So I want to kind of focus on Missouri. Are there still municipalities in Missouri that are maybe approving some of these large projects without the necessary pre-planning and communications and all that? Like, oh, you're going to install fiber, like, okay, done. Is that still happening? And like, do those cause a lot of problems from what you guys have seen?
I'm sure at some degree that's happening, be it lack of staffing or haven't addressed it yet, so to speak. So I think that will always happen at some level. As damage prevention keeps going, I think that will get less and less over time.
I feel like us three are fortunate because we come from larger utilities. I know Columbia has a population of about 120,000. Warrensburg is
19,000. So we're small.
Or
Republic
about
is
24.
24,000. So it's not very small municipalities, but we have a lot of manpower that we can reach out to. Some of these small municipalities, towns of 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, they may only have 4 or 5 people in the entire municipality.
And
So,
do they have the
Yeah.
means of being able to do that?
yeah, if they get overwhelmed with 20
manpower,
contractors.
money, whatever the case may be, it's hard on the really smaller places
Yep.
to adapt some of this stuff.
So a lot of, to answer your question, yes, a lot of them probably are just flying by the seat of their pants. And my
Yes.
recommendation would be, if you're that municipality, reach out to your bigger neighbor down the road that may have already went through this heartache, so you don't have to rewrite the whole book.
Yeah.
Not as familiar with Missouri, but I don't think it's very different, like rural Wisconsin. There are some townships that most of their public roads are still gravel roads, ditch lines, culverts, and that's about the whole infrastructure that the township maintains. They don't have any other underground. So sometimes when these projects come their way and they may not have to deal with locating issues, but they're dealing with mud on the road, with open ditches, open holes, and no matter how small a township is, even if it's just, a cross street with one stop sign, a church and a bar, and, a few homes around, the town chairman is going to hear about it.
Sure.
Well, we had, when we started doing a lot of our stuff, when the fiber companies came in, I had a couple smaller towns that came in and sat in one of my meetings with the contractors. And after that meeting, he wanted the ordinance to see from his standpoint of what can he implement from our ordinance to put into their small community, and just kind of piggyback off of us as a whole, which that helps out a ton for these smaller communities. And I'd be more than welcome to reach out, or anybody calls into from a smaller community, get them into the right person for, here's our city ordinance, here's our policies and procedures, standard practice programs, here you go. It's public knowledge. I mean, it's all public knowledge. I could go to yours, it's public knowledge. I can go to his, it's public knowledge. I mean, as a contractor, you need to go out and look at that. As a different city, municipalities, smaller ones, go out and look at that stuff. I mean, because it's there for you to see it. Then you can actually just implement that into yours, go to your board, see if you can get it all approved.
There is, I'm sure here in Missouri as well, a league of municipalities where they have, like us here, a convention every so often. But a lot of these guys are creating model ordinances, okay, where, like us, around this table, we talk about, best practices for the Common Ground Alliance and something that we can agree on. They have that same process. And hopefully they participate, because there are resources out there, not only, reaching out to the larger municipality, but there are model ordinances out there that they can, at least have something that they can red line and make it work for themselves.
Absolutely. So here's the other thing is that we're sitting here talking about communicating to those smaller communities and giving them that information and that block of information that they can have. It would be so much help for them, because they may not know where to go.
Yeah.
I know whenever I first implemented all my ordinances and stuff, I invited all the communities around me I had one big meeting and shared with them. So everybody, and I've had to reach out since then and talking to different smaller communities. So something like that works. You get everybody together, and if they got questions, we can work it out.
Sure.
Help them out.
So I'm following up on Saul's comment, which I find interesting. Maybe the industry, damage prevention industry, 811, can do more to help educate, especially some of these smaller municipalities that just don't have the resources and the know-how, right? 5,000 people, 15,000 people, whatever. And say, hey, these are some best practice ordinances or guidelines that you should think about implementing as these large fiber or other infrastructure projects come through. I mean, can we do more to guide these municipalities?
Well, I think so. I think the CGA best practices manual is becoming the Bible of how things should be done right. In some states, it's actually mandatory that people follow that. But they are adding sections constantly. There is a section for excavators, for locators, for facility owners. For the next April, they're adding a section on marine lines. How do you go locate, and what's the practices for marking lines that are underwater? Right. I think a great idea would be for them to create a section for municipalities. To take what we talked about here in terms of how you create an ordinance, what's a best practice for a municipality for permitting and so forth.
That's a fabulous idea. And in Missouri now, the Common Ground Alliance best practices are read secondarily as law, so long as they don't contradict with the Missouri state statute, which
That's interesting. That's very cool.
they contradict very, very rarely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I agree with you, Saul. And back to answering part of his question is that is every municipality have all the means of information? No, you get these major cities up to 200,000, 1.1 million. They can still reach out to other bigger cities to find out what they implement and that's just going back to communicating to larger cities. Well, if I'm a 2 million or a 200,000 municipality city, I can reach out to a 500,000. Okay, what are you guys? What is your policy, procedure, standard practices, and can I implement some of that into mine to make it even better?
And I would say the biggest thing is you have to have that conversation before you have a problem. Once you get to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months into a project and having damages every day, and
Absolutely.
God forbid injuries, it's too late at that point to set ordinances and have those conversations. You can only try to improve from there. But
It's not going to happen.
when you switch to being a proactive approach instead of a reactive approach, I think that's where this communication really, really has its most benefit.
I agree. So when you start your project is usually 6 months in advance anyway, so sometimes even a year. That's when you start, when the project's brought to the table is when you need to start doing that communication throughout.
Correct.
And if not before then, because you know it's coming, then communicate before then.
And I would even say, I know in Columbia, a lot of times the right-of-way technician department would know about projects long before the locating department did. But if we didn't communicate, we had no idea. So
Absolutely.
for years, the right-of-way department would know that there was a big project coming, and then the locating department gets slammed with 500 tickets one day, and they throw their hands in the air and say, well, what happened here? Well,
Where did this come
we
from?
weren't communicating
Lack of
internally.
communication.
Yes. Once we
Lack of
started communicating
communication.
internally, and not just internally, we've reached out to the neighboring utilities also and got their input on it. How's this going to affect you? Is this positive? Is this negative? Then we reached out to the local contractors. What do you think about this? Is this going to cripple your system? Is this going to help your system?
So follow up on that, John. When I know there's a big project coming up, not only will I communicate it to my utility inspector, I'll actually reach out to USIC. I'll reach out to Northern Lights. I'll reach out to every locator saying, hey, this project's coming. If you need a copy of this project, here it is. This is what's on the table. This is what they're planning to do. And I'll print it for you. You can have it. That way you have a heads up and you can make plans from there.
And we do the same thing. I'll get the locators. I have good relations with our big utility companies. I'll even call them and say, hey, this is coming. AT&T, the higher ups there, all the people, they'll know, hey, this project's coming. What do you guys need to get in place to make this happen?
So you just don't want to stop the communication right in the municipality. So if you know the project's coming, spread it out. Let it go out to let everybody, all the utilities know. They are all heads up. They can make that pre-plan, and at least they're not blindsided by 500 locates coming in. Well, and we don't have the manpower to do it. If we didn't known ahead of time, then we would have been able to do it.
You know, and as a segue to that, talking about, so what do you do when things go wrong, you know, and you get slammed with hundreds of tickets that you're not going to be able to manage? I will equate this, and I haven't seen it anywhere in terms of locating, but having worked in the electric side, when there is a bunch of outages, like sometimes hundreds of thousands of outages due to a storm, ice storm, wind, what have you, they have special contracts, and they have already written contracts with folks that come in and will help out. Sometimes they will have mutual aid agreements with neighboring utilities where they will bring in linemen to help out restore power. I don't think it would be beyond the ability of a municipality or a utility owner, facility owner, to set up those type of contracts for when they get slammed with locating. Because the big contractors like the USIC, they do have a group of traveling locators that they move them around the country to handle the peaks.
Exactly, because when we started our SOL, is that we went to USIC and said, hey, this is what's coming. And eventually they were able to pull locators in from down here in Springfield, Kansas City, Sedalia. They brought them in from all over to help out because of that project that was going, all the fiber that was going in. They brought them in. I think they had, at one point in time, they had 15 USIC guys in just my little town of Warrensburg. So just giving them a heads up, communicating, give them a heads up beforehand. This is what's going to happen.
Part of the preparation is something you have in your back pocket. You don't. It's a contract that you don't enact, you don't use unless you need it. But you already worked it out. You already have a provider that committed, and you already have pricing and ready to use it when
Absolutely.
it happens.
Sure.
In Columbia, we did that reactively.
Yeah.
Once we had the problem, then we had to reactively go out and procure a contractor, which is a very cumbersome process, takes many, many months. I think we got it done in 3 or 4 months, which was outstanding. That was light years ahead of where I thought it would be. To build on what you were saying about the electric companies, when the power lines go down and the poles are all down, that's a true emergency. That's a big deal. I think a lot of times we treat this damage prevention and locating as it's not really a true emergency. If they go behind, it's okay. We'll catch up when we catch up. But I think once we shift that mindset, this is an emergency. We do need to keep caught up. We do need to keep current. I think that changes the whole thought process behind it. That's when we go get those contracts, those standby contracts.
For me, in Republic anyway, so I got together with all our execs, the fire people. And so if we had a tornado hit, I hope not, but if it did and wiped out my power, I'm going to shut down all construction other than what we need to do to get everything back online. And that's all in place. If something happened, all small projects stop. Nobody's allowed to do anything. All locates will stop. Everything except for what we need to get power and stuff back up. You got that plan in place ahead of time, like you were saying.
Yep. Because you're looking at it proactively instead of reactively.
Right.
All right, thank you. Reminder to audience, if you have any questions, I sense there are questions, but people are shy. Just sit here and then I'll call upon you. So I'm just thinking of ways we could put this into action, right? So it sounds like best practice could be to educate municipalities. Hey, here's some best practices or ordinances or whatever for these large projects. Who should do this? Who in Missouri should do this? Like, I was thinking about this, and it seems like maybe the 811 center, right? So, John, I'm going to put you on hot spot because you're the only one here from the 811 center, right? This seems like a high value, high return project that's not, I'm not downplaying the effort, but it seems like it won't take a ton of effort, right? Hey, here are some best practices, and then send it out to municipalities from the 811 center and just recommendations. Is this something maybe the 811 center should look at doing or facilitating or at least leading an effort on? Or how do we actually implement this?
So in Missouri, I can't speak for all 811 centers, but Missouri 811, we kind of coined the term, we're the hub of damage prevention. So with being the hub of damage prevention, we do facilitate a lot of those conversations. When a municipality calls and say, hey, we've got all these problems, we've got all these locates, we can't keep up, what do? We'll go in, we'll help them right the ship. Now, we're not going to tell them which ordinances fit their town. They know their city better than we do. But we can facilitate that conversation. And if, say we go to a city that's the size of Republic, I can call Tim and say, hey, Tim, how would you approach this? How did you all do this? Take this back to the other city that has questions and go from there. And just communication, peeling those layers back.
Okay, we have a question from an audience member here. Can you please state your name, company, what you do, and then your question, please?
Sure. Gerald Johnson, Director of External Affairs for USIC. First, appreciate the information regarding sharing with contract locating and others outside the municipality. That's critically important. Oftentimes information we don't get, knowing that municipalities are sometimes often the first folks to get that information as you're going through your permitting process. And unfortunately for those that don't have those processes, it's a little more challenging. And the comment regarding bringing in the resources and bringing in 15, 20 locators at a time to remote areas. The question is, municipalities are often inundated with these projects, large projects, to the point of you're looking at hundreds of percentage of points of increase of work in a very short period of time. And it often happens across multiple municipalities. And there's the risk of, there is still the risk of how do we staff for that? The other question being, though, is there a point at which there may have been some unrealistic expectation to get that amount of work done in the amount of time? And we keep talking about the word communication. I'd like to kind of lean back towards coordination to say, shouldn't there be some consideration of the resources that are first available and could be available to complete that work in the time frame allowed? And knowing that, the question being, oftentimes you have to consider that weakest link. For municipalities, oftentimes if it's rear easement type work, municipalities might not have as much to concern themselves with as a rear easement property that's going to take much, much longer to complete. So don't we really have to kind of look towards coordination towards that weakest link in making sure we can keep up with those projects? And how do we improve that coordination effort and or understanding? Is there too much at a point which it could become unsafe for people to start making business decisions about safety? Thank you.
As a former USIC locator in Republic, whenever I talked to them guys initially, Republic was my area when I worked for USIC, so I kind of know that pretty well. And for me, whenever I meet with the contractors, I don't know how Terry does it or how you did it. If they turn in 100 tickets, there's going to be a problem. I'm not going to allow that. And I tell them up front, turn in what you can do, and then I contact the USIC supervisor, say, hey, this is what's coming, this is how many we're going to do. I think if that kind of coordination takes place, it seems to work better. But
We kind of,
I know that doesn't happen in every.
Agree. Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah.
so in Warrensburg, we do the same thing. When I know there's a contractor that's coming in and he's going to be, the job is the job, we understand that. You got 2 miles of locating you're going to do. What I communicate with the contractors is, what can you do within the first 3 days? And then on that second day, what can you do the next 3 days? Call in the locates that you can do for those first 3 days. Then just basically piggyback that so you're not killing all your utility locators and overwhelming that locator at all. In our town in Warrensburg, I have 1 utility locator, and we have 2 USIC guys and 1 Northern Lights and 1 other locator. That's all we have for just our area. USIC guys, the 2 USIC guys are so far spread out because they do the whole county. They don't just do the city. So that's what I communicate to the contractors. Just call it in. We'll keep you moving. We'll keep you moving and keep you locating and get your locates down so that way you can continuous work and not have any downtime. We're going to try to eliminate as much downtime as possible, but by that locator or that contractor calling in, the whole job is going to it's going to flood the system, and your locators are not going to get it. They're going to keep calling for extension, keep calling for extension, keep calling for extension. So if you just call in what you need for those 3 days, and then call in the next 3 days, and then the next 3 days to get to your project, we're gonna keep you moving. And it has worked perfect up there.
It definitely is all about coordination once the project happens. You know, you have the best laid out plans, that coordination with the locator, the facility owner, and so forth. If you don't do that, you are creating a lot more work for yourself. You're creating a lot more work for the locators because first of all, they will expire, or the contractor, you know, in the best of cases, they may have 2 miles painted out there, but they're not going to get there, okay? And they will get, you know, it'll snow, it'll get
Rain.
you know, mowed. All of a sudden, they're calling for relocates, and that locator has to go out there again to get it all done, and because they did not communicate saying exactly what is it that you need.
Yeah, so just because what I do, the way we do it in Warrensburg, that doesn't mean that it's gonna work in Columbia. It's not gonna work in maybe Springfield. They just gotta find out their means of what they can actually do. I've had after all that, I had several contractors come up to me. It's like, man, he goes, I wish every city could be able to figure out how you do it to keep us all moving and get the job done in a timely manner.
So why not just formalize what you guys and Terry are talking about, right? Like, you can't call in 1,000 tickets today in a small town because the average number of tickets is like 2 per day, and we can't ramp up to 1,000. Like, I can't go to Lowe's and say, okay, hey, I need 10,000 yards of soil right now. They don't have it, right? And how does it make any sense if I go in and say I need 10,000 yards of soil right now?
Right.
Oh, you don't have it? Now I throw a hissy fit, right? But why not just formalize this, like some kind of ticket submission limits or constraints that are that make sense, they're reasonable, and they don't set the system up to fail.
I think we go back to what Terry just said, that what works in Warrensburg may not work in Columbia, may not work in Republic. So it's really hard to set a hard standard that you can only call in 1 ticket a day.
Do the 811 ticket management systems, do they have like a fuse that if you get so many tickets for a particular polygon or a particular city, it alerts somebody? That'd be nice, because I think that's what you're asking for, you know. The system
Right, because
has
everything-
limits.
And the system will limit the ticket.
Right, because
And the
everything
system can
Terry
limit
is
the
doing is
tickets.
outside the system. That's what I'm saying. Like, why not just formalize it inside the system so you don't need someone who's proactive and knowledgeable and who, like Terry. I mean, if he didn't do that, it could be a cluster, right, inside his city, right? But why not just formalize it inside the system so he doesn't need to do it outside the system?
And hopefully one day we'll find a cookie cutter approach that works for everybody, that, whether it would be through 811 or Common Ground Alliance or some other organization that could standardize that and come up with a good approach. Right now, I just don't think there's a mechanism out there. There's definitely a need for that.
Exactly. So in the meantime, the contractors got to be able to help us out.
Sure.
And eliminate some of that until that process can actually be done and found and able to do that.
Right. To build back up just a little bit, to build on the question a while ago about the coordination with contract locating companies. Coordination and communication are essentially the same word when we talk about this. I think every municipality should coordinate with the other utilities and the locate contractors, because your weakest link is your breaking point. And
Sure.
You may only be financially responsible for fixing the water lines or the sewer lines or electric lines or whatever utilities you own, but all the people that live in your city, they rely on that fiber optic, whatever it is, the gas, whatever, and you work for them. So you may work for the water department, but while you're out there on that site, keep an eye on the gas. Make sure that gas doesn't get hit, or telephone, even if it's just a telephone drop. A lot of people work from home right now. I know my wife works from home. If somebody were to take her fiber out, she'd be mightily upset. And
We just
She'd take
locate
it out on
water.
you.
she'd take it out on me. She's mean sometimes.
We just have water and sewer. But I've quickly found out that my actual job is to protect the infrastructure for the city or public, not just water and sewer.
Yeah.
It's all of it.
Yes.
And I have, all my ordinances are built around that.
All right, we have a question from an audience member. Please state name, company, what you do, and question.
Alan Meyer, I'm with Spire, I'm the damage prevention manager. So Jimmy, you kind of stole some of my thunder, and I'd love to talk about communication. That's why we're all here, right? It's the people in this room will communicate, but how do you get people outside of this room to communicate and follow the process? But, along Jimmy's lines, I think you can do ordinances and things like that. And I think if something hasn't came to your city yet, it soon will. So you probably should consider that. But from a national level, and I know it's a tough conversation, but how do we limit the amount of work out there? For years we beat the drum and said, call for locates, call for locates, call for locates. It's free, call for locates, right? Fact is, we're doing that in record numbers with fewer people getting into the locating industry, right? So I think we have to step back and look at safety as a part of this. Whether you're Missouri 811, Alabama 811, states we operate in, we understand the data, right? Why can't we look at the data and say, hey, the city of Warrensburg, on average over the last 5 years have had this amount of tickets, right? And then when you see that amount of ticket spike, why aren't we saying time out, right? We're gonna run into resource issues, and the USICs or the Gridhawks, those locators out there, yeah, they can probably bring more people in, but understand that's gonna take something away from someplace else.
True.
Right? So I love the communication. That's really the key to all of it. But the fact is there's going to be people that aren't going to communicate, right? They're just, like Jimmy said earlier, they're going to come to your town and go, hey, I appreciate the conversation, Terry, but I'm calling 1,000 tickets and I need them by Thursday. So just the perspective from you all, and I think you've kind of talked about this a little bit, but what do we think about that, right? Why don't we look at the data and draw a 5-year average, or, start somewhere and just understand that this work can be done safely? And maybe it can move from year to year, but think about a locator, because I was a former locator. If I knew I would receive this amount of tickets per day, I could staff better to that, right? Be effective, give my people a work-life balance, quality of life. Because the other side of it is the Missouri Attorney General just came out and they're going to open an investigation into timeliness, right? On the surface, the timeliness looks bad. But when you're looking at record amount of tickets with fewer resources day by day, I don't know that we get anywhere unless we start talking about ticket throttling and managing the work. So, any thoughts?
I believe at some point in time, we will see a ticket throttling mechanism. Like Alan stated, the work just gets busier and busier and busier every year. And safety is the number one concern. We talk about preventing damage to utilities, and that is a goal.
That all leads to safety
Yeah.
at the end.
But if we have to choose between letting the water main get damaged or letting the guy on the track hoe get damaged or the guy with the shovel get damaged, we're going to err on the side of keep that guy safe. So I think eventually we will see some kind of throttling mechanism in Columbia. For lack of a better resource, the throttling mechanism that we came up with, we decided, we looked through the data, we just determined how many bore rigs, because that was the biggest problem in Columbia with the ticket volume, was bore rigs. We determined that we could handle about 10 bore rigs within that city limits at any given time with the current staff that we had. Now, if we lived above that 10 for a long time, yeah, they could add staff. They're not going to add staff initially, but once the problem gets worse, they could add staff. But with that 10 bore rig threshold, we set towards each of the communication companies could have 2 bore rigs at any given time. And that's all that work is done with the internal staff, the inspections, the locating, all with that internal staff. Now, if you go over top of that 2 bore rigs per utility, so you want to fire up a big project, you want to bring in 10 bore rigs. That's a lot more than what the city could handle. There's thresholds built in to where you have to provide a third-party damage inspector to make sure that the potholing's done properly, that everything's done safe, that essentially nobody gets hurt. Mm-hmm. So there's added cost that utility ensues by taking on that bigger project. And the cost was always there. The municipality was just eating that cost before. They'd have to hire a contractor. They'd have to hire another inspecting contractor. So that's how the city of Columbia throttles tickets back. We're not really throttling tickets back. It's just saying, if you want to build at this speed, if you want to build the whole city in a day, you've got to help share the load on that. Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. And I think some, like the smaller municipalities like myself, as a city standpoint, we got to look at, can I bring in another utility locator? Can it be afforded? Do we have the means and money to bring in another utility locator to be able to fulfill that? And I don't know if we actually, as a municipality as small as we are, if we do have those means. But we've looked into it, and we are looking into it. So the process has started. So we're actually looking at possibly adding an actual just right-of-way manager, just manage all the right-of-way. And that way the utility inspector does not have to do any of that. He just has to do just the inspecting or just the utility itself. So we've looked into that, but can other smaller municipalities do that? Do they have the means and money to be able to do that? It all comes down to, do they have the money?
Right.
So, and that's the key, is do they have the money?
And that goes back to that proactive approach too. If, as a municipality, if you need more money in your damage prevention department, your locating department, you need to take a proactive approach and figure that out ahead of time. That,
Yep.
If this happens, if that happens, we will need more money, and figure out where that comes from. In Columbia, we did not have that mechanism until we were blindsided and everything got real messy real quick. And then we found the money. We had to rob Peter to pay Paul. Now they have a mechanism in place that if this were to happen again, this is where the money would come from, and so on and so forth. But look to your neighbor that's already done it. That's
Right.
You don't have that mechanism right now, but just from this conversation, now you have an idea of where to start.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that's the best approach. It may be the worst approach, but it gives you a starting point to where to look
Yeah,
at.
it's a
You
starting
can
point.
always adjust.
Right.
As you go.
And everything about this that we're talking about is a moving target. What we do today may not work tomorrow.
Just moving pieces,
Yeah.
the pieces that move.
With municipalities, you're allowed to recover your cost of
Sure.
working and processing permits. So you talked about the multiple ball rigs and having to take a different approach. That could well be built into the permitting fees by work type, by the length of the job, and maybe how fast they're going to approach it. And then you are actually getting whoever is causing the cost to be the payer.
And in Columbia, there is an added permitting cost. I believe, don't hold me to this, I believe it's 60 cents per foot.
Oh, okay.
And that was derived from, we tracked a project of the large fiber overbuild for a year, and the city had to procure a locate contract company, and they tracked those costs that they expended through that contract locate company for a full year, divided it by the total number of footage put in.
Smart.
By communicating with the excavators, they willingly gave us this information because they want their projects to get done quickly. They don't want to spend any more money than they have to, but if they have to spend a little bit more money to get their project done quickly and accurately and professionally, they will.
Yeah, and that would be a means of being able to draw that extra money and to create that extra position.
Sure.
All right, great. We have another question from an audience member. Please state name, company, what you do there, and then your question.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Randy Norden, Executive Director of Missouri 811. And some of the questions that have been brought up earlier, I'll provide a little bit of an answer with a comment, and then I do have a very specific question for you guys. With regard to the earlier questions about the 811 centers and the responsibility of the communication and the training and the sharing of this information. For example, in Missouri, we also interact with statewide other agencies, Missouri Municipal League, Missouri Public Utility Alliance, Association of General Contractors, Missouri Land Improvement Contractors Association. So it's not just the notification center sitting there by itself, but actually integrating with the daily operations of the foundational municipal-driven organizations to make sure that their communication channels are sharing that same information, and even things like what I will call the great push to change city ordinances to affect excavators, to keep it globally understood how that should be implemented is actually working through those organizations. In that light, some of the nature of some of the conversations going on today it comes to what I call the great metamorphosis. Back in 1984, when Missouri One Call was first formed, it was identified in Chapter 319 as the notification center. And what I deem as the great metamorphosis is it's getting busier, it's getting more, it's getting crowded, and the notification centers, or the 811 centers, this loose terminology thrown around, is taking on more responsibilities. People are putting greater expectations. The notification system works wonderfully, but then there's the outside conversations. There's the conversations before the ticket's even placed. There's the conversations after the ticket, the perfect ticket in the world with the perfect responses, and then there's conversations going on out there in the ditches. People are asking me about those conversations. And so there is getting to be a greater expanse of the umbrella, of the penumbra of interest with the 811 centers. So coming up here recently with the question about throttling tickets, and it is a very interesting question. It's getting busier and busier, and I liken it to restaurants. You wouldn't dare show up at a restaurant with a busload of 30 people without a reservation. You're not going to get good service. They're not going to have enough waiters on site. So when we have an instance where there is suddenly X hundred tickets laid into, and you expect, I expect those to be done in 2 days. I don't care if you have 2 locators or how many, get it done. That's really an unreasonable expectation. So there is a good and interesting conversation that does go on about ticket throttling, and now I get to my specific question for this panel. You as the utility, would you want to be told what your throttle limit is, or do you want to dictate what your throttle limit is?
That's an excellent question.
That is an excellent question.
I think it would start with, like Alan was saying, look into the data. Let the data more or less decide.
Yeah, let data speak for itself.
Yep.
I mean, how many tickets can we actually handle in a day, or within the week?
Yep.
So,
And that's going to be different for every municipality. Just because you say have 100 square miles of footprint, you may only have 50 square miles of utilities in that footprint. So some municipalities have more rural areas than.
And let's remember too, I mean, we are, while we are facility owners and we're locators, we're also excavators. We are out there installing facilities, whether it's fiber, gas, electric, water, sewer, we are also excavators. So as to, who decides what that throttle is it the facility owner, is it the excavators, is it the locators? I think is, a coordination between all of them, and probably some type of agreement. And unfortunately, we all look at the 811 systems as the arbiter and the coordinator of all that, because there is no one else to go to be a good referee and throw in the yellow flag when somebody's misbehaving. And in many states, you're not chartered to do that. But in the facility owners that pay for you to exist probably are saying, no, we're not going to do that. The board says, no, the ticket price is going to increase, but there has to be some give there too.
Sure.
There has to be given both ways too.
Both ways, both sides.
You can't just expect the excavator to break their back to accommodate your scheduling. You can't just say,
Every
we can only do 1 ticket a day because that's all we want to do. You have to accommodate what's realistic.
Yeah.
and that goes back to realistically, how much can you do in 3 days? And, what you think you can do in 3 days. I mean, in my standpoint at Warrensburg, whatever the contractor calls in, we're going to get them done that day. We don't push them to the next day. None of our locates, very seldom do our locates get pushed to the next day. We get them done because with my utility locator, and if he gets overwhelmed, then I help out. I don't know what's in store for me the next day. So it's best for me to take care of them that day and concentrate on them all that day and then worry about what's next day. So And so I can tell him, if you get overwhelmed, it's one ticket at a time. And don't rush yourself, just one ticket at a time. So you got 8 hours to do it in, one ticket at a time.
Yep.
So,
And on that note, we're going to have to wrap this up. Can we get a hand for our fine panelists here? Thank you.